أما بعد. A number of points before we start. Firstly, in regards to the issue that was asked regarding eating with the left and right and so on. A quick search, just not anything in depth. Majority of the ulama say it's makruh to eat with your left and not haram. But there are some ulama that say it's haram. And the reason for that is it goes back to the issue of what I said, that when it comes to etiquette and adab, then the ulama tend to not say that it's haram. For example, the Prophet said, Afshu salam, spread the salam, which is a commandment, so it should be obligatory. So does that mean every single person you see on the street, you have to give him salam? And if you don't, you're sinning? No. Replying, that's different, but starting the salam? No, because it's from adab. But there are some ulama that say that it is obligatory. I just listened to two clips. Sheikh Sulman al-Ruhaili said it's obligatory, for example, to eat with the right, and it's haram to do with the left. Sheikh Uthman al-Khamis said it's makruh. The issue, you have to remember that this is a Usool al-Fiqh lesson. Usool al-Fiqh, not fiqh. So, we're going to, inshallah, any questions like this, I'm not going to answer, inshallah. No, because otherwise you can go into what about this, what about that. So, we're going to stick to Usool al-Fiqh, inshallah. That's the first point. Second point, some people asked regarding makruh tahrimi, makruh tanzihi and stuff like that. This is more found in the Hanafi madhab and not in the other three madhahib. And the similar can be said regarding fard and wajib. The difference in fard and wajib, the majority of ulama say that there's no difference. But mainly, again, the Hanafi madhab, they differentiate between that. And because it's a beginner's book, I don't want to go into, because for you, you're probably asking about this, but to be honest, nearly every issue I could say, majority say this, the Hanafi say this, and or the Shafi'i say this. We don't need to go into that at the moment. Right now, we just need to understand all of these technical terms, understand what they mean, understand like an example and application of it, and then inshallah, once you've understood all of that, when you move to the next book, like Rawdat al-Nazir, or the summary of the Rawdat al-Nazir, Bulbul, or whatever it may be, then in those books we can go into more detail regarding what every single madhab said and what's correct and what's a stronger opinion and so on. So we have to study in stages. Otherwise, we'll spend so much on the beginning, and this happens a lot. A lot of time what happens is that you'll find students, when it comes to tahara, for example in fiqh and salah, they're ready. Oh, Sheikh Albani said this, and this Sheikh said this, and they're ready to argue. As soon as the ibadat finish and transactions start, quiet. Don't know anything. Nikah and talaq, they don't know anything. So, let's learn everything, at least once. And then after that, we can talk about the differences later on. Okay, so we were on mubah. So the Shaykh says, mubah linguistically means something declared or permitted to do. And technically it means what is not connected with a command, or not something prohibited in and of itself. So that's the definition he gave, meaning there's no command and there's no prohibition connected to it, meaning that it is permissible. You have a choice to do it or not to do it. But then the Shaykh says a very important word, and he says لِذَاتِهِ, in of itself, or in and of itself. And this is very important, because mubah, in of itself, mubah is something permissible. There's no reward, there's no punishment. However, depending on a person's intention, it can change the ruling of something which is mubah to something which is any of the other four rulings. So it can take it to mustahab, it can take it to wajib, it can take it to makruh, it can take it to muharram or haram, depending on the intention. So, for example, if a person was to sleep, that's something permissible, there's no reward. But if he sleeps with the intention that I want to sleep now so that I can wake up and have energy to pray Qiyam al-Layl, for example, or pray Fajr, then he will get rewarded for that sleep. That's why Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he said, أحتسب نومتي كما أحتسب قومتي, that I take into consideration, meaning I make this intention for my sleep just as I do for my food. So likewise for the food, he had the intention, I would eat so that I have energy to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can see the fiqh of the Sahaba, how even the things which are permissible, the normal day things, they would do it in such a manner that they would be rewarded for it. So that's why having the intention is something which is very important. So this wording of the Shaykh, لِذَاتِهِ, in of itself, or in and of itself, is very important. So mubah, the foundation ruling is that it's permissible. There's no reward or sin connected to it, unless there's some external factor which changes the ruling, such as one's intention. And the intention is, even in other, not even just in mubah, but also in mustahab, for example, and wajib. If you wake up in the morning and you pray 2 rak'at, if you had the intention of the 2 rak'at of Fajr, then it's the sunnah. If you had the intention that it was the fard, then it becomes obligatory. So it's changed from doing something wajib to something which is mandub, depending on your intention. That's why Imam Shafi'i said that the hadith إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, it enters into 70 different chapters of fiqh. 70 different chapters of fiqh.
Can we change our intention in between? Like we are praying nafil, and just like we remember we have to pray the witr. So can we change during the
This again, first is a fiqh question. So so I'm not going to go into too much. Secondly, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So this requires some explanation. So if I'm praying 2 rak'at of Fajr, I can't just change that into fard, into Fajr. I can't do that. But there are other times where you can, because it's a fiqh question, I'm not going to go into that, inshallah. The next, then the Shaykh carries on, he says, like eating during the nights of Ramadan. Eating at night, in Ramadan, after Maghrib to Fajr, permissible. So nothing wrong with that. So that's an example. Then he says, so what is excluded from our statement, what is not connected with a command, and that which is wajib and mandub recommended. And the Sheikh basically explains, is basically explaining this graph that we drew on or the tree diagram that we drew on the board. Then he says in the next paragraph, and something is mubah, permissible, as long as the description is one of permissibility. Meaning, it's permissible as long as you do it in a manner which is permissible. Anytime, even if it's an external factor would come to make it haram, then it will become haram. Eating is permissible, but now if you're eating haram food, then that becomes haram. So, no. And then it will not result in reward or punishment. It is also called halal and jaiz. Another word for mubah is halal, this is halal. And it is also known as jaiz. There's also another word which is not used as much. It's called tilq. Ta lam qaf. Or tilqun. Ta lam qaf. Tilq. So in English you write Tilq. Okay. It's not used as much, but it is another name. Same, all synonyms. Okay, alhamdulillah, with that we have finished ahkam taklifiyah. There's quite a bit that I wanted to take, so inshallah, please pay attention. This ahkam wada'iyya I really want to finish. The next chapter, knowledge, I want to finish. The next chapter after that, it's a bit long. If we can finish it, then amazing. If not, then at least we should reach that chapter, inshallah. Now we will move on to ahkam al-wada'iyya, which is this side, which we haven't really talked about. Now, ahkam wada'iyya is very hard to define. And I've spoken to some teachers regarding this, and they find it difficult to define. Because sometimes if they try to give a definition, some things are missed out. One of my teachers, he said, the best thing to do is just to name everything which comes under it. Ahkam wada'iyya, just mention all the terminologies. So it's about 7, 8 main terminologies, just mention all of them. But we'll stick to what Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen said here, inshallah. And we'll explain that. But inshallah, if you don't understand it, as we take the examples, it'll become more, you'll be more familiar and you'll understand more that, okay, this example comes in the ahkam wada'iyya. And sometimes, if you can't understand definitions, then you give examples. Okay, and that's why some would do that so many times. He would give examples, or he would draw on the board, or on the ground, and so on. This is a prophetic way of the Prophet how he would teach. So giving examples is always good. So inshallah, with the examples, it will become more clear, inshallah. He says the rulings of wada'iyya as that which, so this is a definition, the legislator has placed signs for, to prove its validity or absence of, meaning invalid, or implementation or cancellation, and from, this is the exact same, implementation, cancellation, valid or invalid, it's just referring to more to, you could say, buying and selling. So buying and selling, you would say you cancel it, because it's invalid, you would cancel it, basically. It's the same thing though. And from which is valid, sahih, and invalid, fasid. So all similar thing. The Shaykh is saying that majority of the time, ahkam wada'iyya, as those things which the religion has placed, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed as a sign to show something. As a sign to show something. So, I'll give you a number of examples for you to understand, inshallah. So, for example, the sun coming up at the zenith, which is the start time of dhuhr, for dhuhr to be obligatory. Okay. What's the ruling on the sun coming up? This is not something that comes under, we're not able to do. So it wouldn't come under ahkam taklifiyya. We're not commanded to bring the sun up. Okay? However, when the sun does reach that point, then dhuhr is obligatory upon us. Then dhuhr is obligatory. So praying dhuhr is ahkam taklifiyya. But the sun coming up, that's called ahkam wad'iyya, because that is a sign to show us that dhuhr is not obligatory upon you. And likewise the other salawat. So that is an example, okay? That is one type of ahkam wad'iyya. Likewise, in giving zakah, reaching the nisab, the threshold, it's not obligatory for you to reach that. Meaning, if you don't have enough money that reaches the threshold, you're not sinning, okay? However, if you do reach the nisab, then that is a sign that it's obligatory upon you to pay zakah. So that would come under. So reaching the nisab, what's the ruling on that? Which type of ruling? Is it ahkam taklifiyya or ahkam wad'iyya? Ahkam wad'iyya. Because it's not obligatory or any of those five for you to reach the nisab. Inshallah. So this is one type of ahkam wad'iyya. We'll mention a few. As-sahih wal-fasid. The Shaykh's going to mention them as well. I'll just quickly, before we do mention them, I'll mention two different differences between ahkam taklifiyya and ahkam wad'iyya. Two differences between them. The first difference is that ahkam al-wad'iyya is either not in the ability of the mukallaf, either it's not in his ability, or he's able to do it but he's not obliged to do it. Okay. So either he's not able to do it, or he is able but he's not obliged to do it. And they're the two examples that I just gave. The first is either he does not have the ability to do so, and secondly, he does have the ability but he's not commanded to do that action. So these are the two examples that I gave are both for this. So he does not have the ability, bringing the sun up, okay, or he does have the ability but he's not obliged. That's the zakah. So he might have the ability to go and work and make money and so on, but he's not obliged to reach that nisab. Okay. Obviously, if he's got family to look after, then he's obliged to look after the family and so on. That's a separate and different issue. The second difference is that ahkam wad'iyya is more general. More general than ahkam taklifiyya. Ahkam wad'iyya are more general than ahkam taklifiyya. And this is because every hukm taklifi, every ruling which is taklifi, it has many ahkam wad'iyya with it. So each one of these rulings has many of these rulings with it. Each one of ahkam taklifiyya or hukm taklifi has at least one hukm wad'i with it. Okay? And I'm going to mention some of the ahkam wad'iyya. I'm just going to mention what they are, and then you'll understand the second point. Okay? So from the ahkam wad'iyya also is shart, condition, something which is a condition. So you say, what's the ruling on this? It's a condition. So, for example, the sun coming up, from the condition from the conditions of dhuhr being obligatory is that the sun reaches that time. Before that time, you can't pray. Okay? So shart is one. Mani' is another. Mani' means preventer, something which prevents you from doing an action. So, for example, a woman, while she's on a monthly cycle, she can't pray because there's something preventing her, which is her being on the cycle. So that's a mani'. That's something which prevents you from doing an action. We have sabab. Sabab just means reason. This is a reason for this and so on. We have as-sihha or sahih. So you could say, this person's prayed salah. What's the ruling on this salah? Is it sahih? And the second is fasid, or fasad or fasid. So is it sahih or fasid? Which ruling are we going to give it? Either sahih or fasid. And another word for fasid is batil, which we're going to get to shortly, inshallah. So these are some of the words which are, or some of the concepts which come under ahkam wad'iyya. Okay? So now you can understand. Now, if you have salah, let's say, same example, Salat al-Dhuhr. Okay? Salat al-Dhuhr has one hukm taklifi, which is wajib. But it has many of these others, ahkam wad'iyya. So it has ahkam wad'iyya, that shart, the sun coming up, for example. It also has, okay, once he's prayed, is it sahih or fasid? Okay? So if he's prayed correctly, then it's sahih. And if he has prayed incorrectly, let's say he prayed without wudu, we would say it is fasid. So the point being is that sahih, fasid, batil, shart, mani', all of these are rulings that we give to certain actions. Rulings that we give to certain actions, correct? But they won't come under ahkam taklifiyya because we are not commanded. You know, it won't come under any of these. But they will come under ahkam wad'iyya. Does that make sense? Example, the thing is, of each one I can go into many examples. I don't want to. The Shaykh only give 2, so I'm just going to stick to 2 inshallah. Because the book is so long, I've decided I'm just going to stick to what the Shaykh has said. I'm not going to add extra.
You can say like this, action is like a clear, and another one is the way of doing is Huzaifa.
Sorry?
No, action of, for example, action of prayer means we
prayer.
Have to pray means the first one.
Prayer is taklifi, yeah, wajib.
The way of doing the prayer is Huzaifa, you can say like this.
Is what?
The way of doing the prayer.
Oh, wad'i, the way of praying. Not necessarily the way of praying, no. Because way of praying would come under. So for example, standing, that's also a pillar, something obligatory you have to do. Saying the dua in the beginning is mustahab. Saying Surah Fatiha, obligatory you have to do. So the way of praying, no.
Anything which is the way of praying is what?
Sorry?
Anything which is not taklifi is what?
You could maybe define it like that. Anything which isn't would not come under taklifi, it would come generally it would come under wad'i. Okay?
In the prayer, all these rulings will come, right? Like wajib, dua.
In prayer?
Like some rukn, some shurut, like that.
It depends on exactly what it is. I can't give a general ruling. It depends on the things which are in there.
The pen is lifted from the child and the one who is insane. And
So
even the condition is
no,
applied.
because he has a mani', he has a preventer.
Preventer, yes.
So something's prevented it from being obligatory, which is him not having intellect, not reaching the age of puberty, whatever it may be. Okay, so that would be mani'. Okay?
Starting a month, like starting Ramadan, comes under this one.
Yeah, in fasting Ramadan, obligatory. But the month starting is wad'iyah, because you have no control over that. You have no control over that.
This comes under sabab.
It could come under sabab, and it might come under shart. It could. Sabab and shart are very similar, very similar. I don't really want to go into it. I don't want to go into it. But they are similar. And I'll give you an example, right? If I was to define even shart to you, it'd be very difficult to understand. That's why we're not going to mention shart. So for example, the definition of shart that the ulama give is, I can't find it here. The definition is, ما يلزم من وجوده الوجود وما يلزم ولا يلزم من عدمه العدم. What its presence necessitates presence, and its absence necessitates absence. And mani', its presence necessitates absence, and its absence necessitates does not necessitate presence. Right? What do you understand? خلاص. That's the definition of them too, huh? Even in Arabic, ما يلزم من وجوده الوجود ولا يلزم من عدمه العدم. And the other is ما يلزم من وجوده العدم ولا يلزم من عدمه الوجود ولا عدم. Next time. So listen. The reason I say I don't want to do this is because I know how difficult it is. So let's just let's move on, inshallah. Like the Sheikh, okay, he says, we have the whole book to finish, come on, inshallah. Any other questions? If you really don't understand, ask me at the end. Any other questions you really don't understand, ask me at the end, inshallah. If they are really important, you remember and ask me at the end. Number 1, as-sahih. So he gives example of sahih. So we are talking about sahih. As-sahih linguistically means something free of disease. So linguistic means sahih, free of disease. That's why if somebody is ill, marid, and if he is fine, you say he's sahih. They can use that in Arabic. I don't know about Urdu, but Arabic, you can say he is sahih. That's fine. Salim is another word. No.
In Punjabi as well, Sayyid.
Okay. And technically it means the effects resulting from an act of worship or contract. Meaning, what it means, the effects resulting, meaning if it's like an act of worship, then what's the effect? The effect is that you're rewarded and the obligation is removed from you. So if your salah is sahih, and that means you'll be rewarded. The obligation is no longer on you. Nobody will tell you to repeat the salah. So that's what it means. The effects they take place, and in transactions, the buying and selling is correct, and then the money belongs to the other person and the possession belongs to the other person. Depending on what type of transaction it is. And obviously, this is the opposite of fasid or batil, which means the effects won't take place. Meaning, if you pray salah and it's fasid or batil, meaning invalid, then the effects don't take place. Meaning, the obligation has not been lifted. Meaning, it's still obligatory for you to pray. And another one was, if it's sahih, they won't tell you to repeat. But in this case, they will tell you to repeat because it is not correct. When I say tell you to repeat, obviously that's maybe if there was if the Amir had the ability, or maybe your parents, they had the ability to command you, then they will tell you to repeat because it's not correct. But the point being is that the effects take place in sahih, and in fasid they do not take place. That's why Sheikh carries on to say, so sahih, valid acts of worship are acts that fulfill the responsibility by meeting the requirements. The translation is a bit different to what I have, but it's okay. And what is sahih valid regarding contracts is that the effects of it are directly affected by its existence, such as the relationship between property and contract of sale, for example. So nothing can be valid until it meets the necessary conditions and is free from any obstacles. So preventing it from being valid. So in this sentence, the Sheikh basically, he answers a question. How do we know if something is sahih? When is something sahih? When is something considered sahih? And the Sheikh said two answers. All the conditions, the shurut, they are all fulfilled, and there are no mawani', there are no preventers. So he says, for example, part of worship is to perform the prayer on time, fulfilling all of the conditions, pillars and obligatory steps. An example of contracts is to have a contract of sale fulfilling all of the known conditions without anything that would stop it from being a valid contract. So if one of these conditions is not present, or impediment is present, mani', preventer, it prevents it from being valid. An example of that is the condition of worship, to pray without purification. An example of that in contracts is the absence of a requirement in the contract, such as selling that which one does not have. Meaning, you're not allowed to sell something you don't own. Yeah. So these are just examples the Sheikh gave, and it's basically what I just said before that. An example of the presence of an impediment, meaning a mani' in worship, is to offer the nafil prayers at the time of prohibition. So there are certain times where you're not allowed to pray, which are after Asr, after Fajr until sunrise, and third one? He said that after Asr? Zawal. What's Zawal? Yeah, when the sun is on the zenith. Okay, so right above your head. So after Fajr until sunrise, and sunrise is fully, after Asr until the sunset, and at the time of the zenith. So praying at that time is not permissible. Now there is a fiqh issue of, are there certain types of salat which are permissible or not, which we are not going to go into. But just, generally, you're not allowed to pray in those times. So if you would pray in those times, because you're not allowed, it will not be accepted. An example of the presence of a mani', I'm saying the Arabic words because I want you guys to get used to that. In contracts, it's to sell something during Friday prayer after the second call in a way that is not permissible. Allah says, Ya alladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawm al-jum'ah fas'au ila dhikrillah wa dharul bay'. When basically Jum'ah starts, you're not allowed to buy and sell. So at that time, if somebody does do the buying and selling, then that transaction is not valid. Number 2, fasid. Linguistically, fasid is basically the opposite of sahih. Linguistically means something that has been lost or is at loss. And technically means the effects that do not result. They don't take place from an act of worship or a contract. Therefore, the fasid, invalid acts of worship, are those that do not fulfill the obligation. So the demand is not met till the end. Okay? The Sheikh basically, I was going to skip the next 2 paragraphs. He's basically mentioning the opposite of sahih. And he gives the examples of that. And then the Sheikh talks about an issue which is, is there a difference between fasid and batil? Is there a difference between fasid and batil? And the Sheikh says, fasid and batil have the same meaning. So, except in two instances. Except in two cases. Meaning, the ulama, when they speak, there are two cases where they do not have the same meaning. The first is in ihram. I was doing hajj, was he in the state of ihram, then there's a difference. He says, fasid is what the person in ihram treads on whilst in ihram before the first constraints of ihram are lifted. And batil is if he denounces Islam whilst doing it. What he basically means is that fasid, if you basically anything that invalidates your hajj, that's fasid. Batil is if a person apostates. He becomes a murtad. He said then they use the word batil instead of fasid. Because obviously that nullifies the hajj as well. So it's still, you could argue it would come under the first point, but they differentiate. They say that anything that breaks the hajj before the at-tahallul al-awwal, which is before the stoning, shaving the hair and doing tawaf, anything before that. But batil is specific to if a person breaks the hajj by becoming an apostate. So that's a slight difference between the two that some of the ulama have mentioned. And likewise in marriage basically fasid is those things, if you say, those issues that the ulama differ in. So if the ulama differ in something, and you take the opinion that this nullifies the marriage, they say that marriage is fasid. But if it's something which all the fuqaha agree upon, then they say it's batil. So basically you can see from these two that batil is a bit more severe. Okay? So in the first one, it's turning away from apostating from Islam. And the second is in something that all of the ulama agree upon. These are just slight differences. It's not really too important to know at this moment. Okay, with that, alhamdulillah, we finished the chapter of ahkam. And like we said, ahkam is basically it's added in the beginning of the books of Usool al-Fiqh because you need it for the rest of, for Usool al-Fiqh and for fiqh. So now if I need to give a ruling on something, I'm going to use these terminologies. Wajib, mandub, makruh, sahih, batil, shart, sabab, and so on. Okay? Obviously we didn't go into many of the ahkam wad'iyah because the Sheikh didn't mention them. He didn't mention them, so we don't want to mention them. Also, but I did mention about, I think, 5 of them. So later on, maybe in a different book, we can take the rest of them, inshallah. The next chapter, the Sheikh talks about knowledge. It's titled Knowledge. This is page number 18. Okay, page number 18. The Sheikh talks about knowledge. And what he means by knowledge here, he's going to explain what is knowledge, and then he's going to mention the different levels of knowledge. Now, what is actual knowledge? Then that's, it's quite straightforward. The Sheikh's made it a bit technical. But what is important to know are the different stages of knowledge. Because different rulings can be based upon the different type of knowledge. Meaning, if a person has certainty, for example, in Salah, if you have doubt, so this is a type of knowledge. Are you in the 3rd rak'ah or the 4th? Then they use the qaida al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak, and you stick to the lower number and you're in the 3rd. Because your knowledge is a level of doubt. But if you are certain you're in the 4th, what do? You carry on with the 4th. So, what was the difference between you staying in you continuing in the 4th, and in the other scenario you going back to 3rd? Even if you were in the 4th, is the amount of knowledge that you had. Because in the first one you had doubt, and in the other you had certainty. So that's why knowing these different levels are important. Okay, and sometimes you might mention a few things. Like I mentioned the different types of wajib, for example. And we may not necessarily go into detail regarding some of the issues that come under them right now. But it's important to know so that you are familiar with them, so that later on in the big books, if Allah allows us to study them, then it's easier for you to understand the other issues because you already have a foundation regarding these terminologies. So he says, al-ilm, the definition of knowledge is the perception of something for what it really is and being firmly aware of it. Okay? Meaning, the perception of something for what it is, or what it really is. Meaning, give like a really easy example. If I said banana to you, inshallah, everyone is thinking of the yellow fruit. Yeah, yellow feet outside. Right. So you have knowledge of that because that's what it is. If I said banana and you're thinking of an apple, okay, then you are not thinking of what it really is. You're thinking of something else. So then they will say that's what the Sheikh basically means by the statement. Okay, like I said, it's a bit technical, but that's what it means. Okay, so knowledge is where you perceive something, you think about something, how it is in reality, how it actually is. Okay, and I give a very easy example to prove that. If you think of something, and either it's totally against what it actually is, so somebody mentions something to you and you're thinking about something completely else, or you're thinking about it but not exactly how it is, then that would be a different level of knowledge. So that's not called ilm. So right now he's defining al-ilm, knowledge. Okay. As for the others, the Sheikh's going to get to that inshallah. So then he gives the other examples. The Sheikh says, such as knowing that the whole is greater than a part. Okay. What's bigger? The whole book or a part of a book? The whole book. It's quite straightforward. It's not really it's something people think about. So that's knowledge. The Sheikh's giving very easy examples. And that the intention is required for worship. That's also knowledge. That you need an intention. You can't just you can't just go swimming. You come out and you say, oh yeah, I've got wudu. Everyone knows you have to have the intention. So that is called, if you know that, then that's ilm. If you know that you have to have intention for wudu or for any worship to be accepted, then that's called knowledge. So what is excluded from our words? Okay. What we can do is that the Shaykh is going to talk about the definition. We can skip this part slowly, slightly. And if you go to the next page, this is basically the summary of this chapter. Go to page 19. That's basically the summary of the chapter, okay? And the only reason if I skip something is only because it's very easy. You can read it yourself, you'll understand. You don't need an explanation. But the summary is this. The levels of knowledge are 6. So he says, and this shows that the perceptions of things are attached to the following. And he mentioned 6. So there are 6. How many levels of knowledge are there? 6 levels of knowledge. Number 1, knowledge. So the first is knowledge, al-ilm. The perception of something for what it really is and being firmly aware of it, like we mentioned. And then we have number 2, plain ignorance. And number 3 is compound ignorance. Okay, so these are both ignorance, but there's 2 types. Number 2, plain ignorance, a lack of awareness in the totality of something. Okay? In other words, you know that you don't know. You know that you don't know. So for example, if I said to you, the definition of shart, ما يلزم من وجوده الوجود ولا يلزم من عدمه الوجود ولا عدم. What does that mean? Right, you're going to say, yeah, I don't know. That's plain ignorance. Okay? Maybe some of you know, but I'm just guessing, right? So that's called plain ignorance. Compound ignorance, and this is a dangerous one. A perception of something in contravention to what it really is. In other words, a person thinks he knows, but he doesn't know. A person thinks he knows, but he doesn't know. Okay? So I said that to you, I said that definition, and he's thinking about some other concept in Islam. And that's very dangerous. Okay? That person thinks he knows, but in reality he doesn't know. Because a person who doesn't know, he'll say, I don't know, and he'll learn. When a person thinks he knows, then he's not going to learn, and he's going to keep making that mistake. So both of these are ignorance. Both cases, a person doesn't know. But there's a difference between how he perceives it. The first is that he knows that he doesn't know, and the second is thinking that he knows, but in reality he doesn't. Yeah, so the first one is al-ilm. Number 2, plain ignorance is known as al-jahl al-basit. Basit means plain, simple. And compound ignorance is al-jahl al-murakkab. Murakkab means compound. Number 4, we have al-dhann. And al-dhann sometimes is translated to assumption. Okay? So the Shaykh, he says, a perception of something with the prospect of it being against a lesser or a less correct view. In simple terms, 2 options. One option is stronger than the other. One option is stronger than the other. So if you take the stronger opinion, then that's a dhann. Yes, that's a dhann. Okay? And waham, number 5, is the opposite. A perception of something with the possibility of it being against the most correct view. So the opposite. 2 opinions, you've taken the lesser opinion. You've taken the less likely opinion. And then number 6, shak. Shak is doubt. Okay? A perception of something with the possibility of it having something equally correct opposing it. In terms of numbers, 50-50. 2 options, exact same. You don't know. The exact same. Okay? So these are the 6 levels of knowledge. And these are important because rulings can be based depending on the type of knowledge. So if somebody has yaqeen or al-ilm, knowledge, then his ruling is different to a person who has shak. And it could be different to a person to have dhan. And even dhan, in of it, we have dhan and we have ghalabat to dhan as well. So these are important terminologies to also know the answer of, the meaning of. By the way, today's lesson, most of it in the book are all introductory points. The actual proper usul al-fiqh starts in the beginning of tomorrow, inshallah. So if you think these things are a bit but they're important because these are terminologies that you need for the rest of the book, and you need in fiqh also. Then the Shaykh, he says, categories of knowledge. Knowledge is divided into 2 parts, the essential and the theoretical. The first, essential, in Arabic, daruri, and theoretical, nazari. What this basically is, essential are those things which you don't need to look into, you just know. You don't need to look, everyone just knows. Okay? So something daruri in Islam is that we worship Allah and the Prophet ﷺ is the messenger of Allah. Okay, that's something that every Muslim has to know. Okay? Nadhari would be something where you have to look into. So maybe the issue that he asked before is eating with the left makruh or haram. That's something you maybe have to look into. Ulama differ. That's nadhari. That's something you have to look into. Okay, nadhari. Yeah, from the word nadhar, you have to look into. Okay, so if you read what the Shaykh says, essential knowledge is that thing known is essential, whereby a person can't help but know it. He can't help but know it, without the need to look for it or to extrapolate it, such as the knowledge that the whole is greater than the part, and that fire is hot. Fire is hot. No one's going to turn around and say fire is cold. And that Muhammad is a messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 2, theoretical knowledge, nazari, is that which needs to be considered and looked into, such as knowledge that intention is necessary in the prayer. Okay, is it in the prayer or in wudu? Okay, even this. So you have to look into it. Like, is it actually necessary? You have to go and look at hadith. You go and look at the hadith and from the hadith and innamal a'malu binniyat. You have to use this other hadith to prove that it is something obligatory and that you have to come with. Okay? Now, right, now speech, al-kalam. This chapter is a bit technical and a bit difficult because it's a lot to do with the Arabic language. So there's a lot of words and there's a bit of Arabic grammar as well in here. So if you know Arabic, it'll be a lot easier. If you don't know Arabic, it might be a little bit difficult. But I'll try to explain it in a way where it is understandable for everybody, inshallah. Okay? And this is the beginning of the Shaykh talking about dalalat al-alfaz. When he talked about looking at the wording and how do we extract from the wording. So he needs to talk about speech because all of these words are from speech. So he's going to give a general introduction to speech and some of the different wordings and some of the different meanings and terminologies to speech, because without it you can't fully understand that which comes after it. So he says the definition of speech linguistically means a word that has been placed with a particular meaning, and technically it means a beneficial word or phrase such as Allah is our Lord and our Prophet is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's what kalam is. Okay, al-lafzu al-mufid. And this, I don't want to go into it. If you want more detail, then the first line of the book Al-Rumaithiya talks about this, the definition of al-kalam. The main thing you need to know is that it is something which is beneficial, that you say it and it makes sense and there's benefit you take from it. So the Arabs will not consider, if I was to say, if if Salman comes, and I stop there. If Salman comes, I stop. You're all waiting for me to continue and finish the sentence, right? So that's not considered beneficial. Beneficial is a whole full sentence which somebody takes benefit from. And the Shaykh gives a nice benefit. He says the least speech consists of is two nouns or a verb and a noun. Okay? So in Arabic, what's the shortest sentence that you can have? Either two nouns or one verb and a noun. Okay? Obviously in the translation it may change, from the number two may change, but in terms of Arabic it's just two words, either two names or one name and a verb. So the example of two names is Muhammadun Rasulullah. Rasulullah is considered one word. Okay? So Muhammad, Rasulullah. And an example of this second is Qama Muhammadun, Muhammad stood up. Or the example the Shaykh gave, Istaqama Muhammadun, Muhammad remained steadfast. If you're not really into Arabic, you're probably just going to look over this. But it's important to know, especially if you want to study the Arabic language. Inshallah. This will encourage you as well, inshallah. Huh? Yes. Then the Shaykh, he says, a single unit of speech is a word, and it is the word that has been placed with a particular meaning, being either a noun, verb, or particle. Now the Shaykh is basically saying that he's going to talk about one word now. He's going to talk about a word. A word in Arabic, a kalima in Arabic, is one of three types. It's one of three types. It is either an ism or a fi'l or a harf. Ism means noun, fi'l means verb, and harf means particle. It's better to translate it as particle rather than letter, because the harf in Arabic has two meanings. It can mean letters, like alif, ba, ta, sa, and so on. However, in Arabic language, that's not the meaning intended. Huruf are they were known as particles, such as fi, which means in, min, from, ala, ba, ya, bi. All of these are considered huruf. And the Shaykh is going to go through each of them. Okay, and I'll try to go through this quickly, because I know, if you're not studying Arabic, then you especially towards the end of the day, I don't think you'll be. I can see people already, not paying attention. So, the first is the noun. A noun is a word that gives a meaning in of itself without any element of time. So, a noun is basically a name of a person or an object. The definition the Shaykh basically says is that it gives a meaning in of itself without any element of time, which is a more technical meaning. So, a noun, if I say Muhammad, right, does that let's use something. If I say Zaid, okay, does that give you a meaning? You think of a person called Zaid. Okay, I'm giving a random name, but let's say Tanwir. Let's use Tanwir. Okay, I say Tanwir. Do you think of someone? Yes. No, I think of Sheikh Tanwir. Okay, good. Does it give you a time? If I say Tanwir, are you thinking of him in past tense, present tense, or future tense? Or are you just thinking without any time? There's no time. There's no time linked with it. That's what the Shaykh means. Without any element of time. Then the Shaykh, he says, then it is of three types: the what signifies generality, and the second and third. I'm just going to skip over them for now. I don't want to make it too technical for those not studying Arabic. The verb, a word which indicates a meaning by itself. So, if I say ذهب means he went. So it gives you a meaning. And according to its form, contains one of the three tenses: the past tense, the present tense, or the imperative tense, which is istifham. The Shaykh has used, which means a question, basically. Imperative means, which means command. It's a command, fi'l amr. Such as ifham, which means understand. Basically, a Sheikh is saying that a verb, when I say he went, you understand the meaning, and it's also with a time zone. So, he went, past, future, which is past. He is going, present. He will go, future. So that's what a verb is. However, in Arabic, they only have two. They have past, which is madi, and then they have mudari', which is present and future, both together. Both together. And how do you differentiate? You differentiate with the context, or you can add some huruf, which also tells you which one it is. And then the third type is a command, which is, if, like, for example, ifham, that means understand. So the Shaykh give examples. Fahima means he understood. Yafhamu, he is understanding. Ifham, understand. So the verb with all these types signifies no restriction, but not generality. And then the last is the particle, a word that denotes a meaning in other than itself, including the following particles. Meaning, when you say in, if I say fi, which is in, if I say min, which means from, do you understand anything? The meaning is only complete when you add it to another word. Min al-bayt, from the house. Okay, you understand that something happened from the house. And Shaykh gives examples of some of them. He gives examples of, firstly, al-waw. It is used as an attraction showing association between two items in ruling. It does not, however, constitute order, nor does it negate it except with a proof. And the next one is fa. Remember I talked about difference between waw, fa, and thumma. Yeah? Waw, if you use waw, it just means and. Okay? Both of the people, or if it was, let's use the example, dakhala aliyun wa Muhammad. Not necessarily the same time. It doesn't necessarily mean the same time. It just means they both entered. We don't know. No, we don't know who came first. Maybe one came first, maybe one came later, maybe they came at the same time, we don't know. The waw just shows that the action took place at the same time. And then we have the fa, which means, so if we say dakhala aliyun fa zaydun, straight after. Ali came first, Zayd came straight after. If I say dakhala aliyun thumma zaydun, yeah. Yes, after some time, very good. So that's al-waw wal-fa. Then the Shaykh, he mentioned al-lam. Lam, so like هذا الكتاب لمحمد. So before the word Muhammad you had lam, or you can add this lam to many words. You can add it to a verb. جئت هنا لأدرس, for example. And depending on the sentence, the meanings differ. So the Shaykh mentioned a few: reasoning, ownership, permissibility. Like I said, this is a bit of Arabic grammar and so on. I don't want to spend too much time on this. And the last one was ala. Ala is very important. I'll mention this one because it's very important. Ala literally means on, on top of something. Okay. But in Usool fiqh, when you see the word ala, it can mean obligation. So if I say alayka or alaykum bi kaza, upon you is to do this, this and that, then that would show upon you means you have to do it. It's obligatory upon you to do it. So let's go back to the ayah previously. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam. If you remember, I said that this ayah shows that fasting is obligatory in more than one way. And because we were talking about the word maktub or kataba, I said kutiba, that could show it's obligatory. Right, now we know another way as well, which is Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam. The word alaykum. The word alaykum. So the word ala indicates that it is obligatory. So from this ayah, so far, how have we derived from, because the ayah doesn't say fasting is obligatory. Okay? But how have you come to that conclusion that fasting is obligatory? From this ayah, so far we have two ways. The word kutiba and the word alaykum. There's a few others as well. If they come, we'll come back to this ayah and we will keep adding, inshaAllah. Then the Shaykh now he moves on to different types of speech. Okay? And we will take these two. As for al-haqiqa wal-majaz, we'll take that tomorrow because that gets a bit interesting. And we'll take that when you have fresh minds, inshallah. As for this, we can take this a bit quick. Parts of speech. The Shaykh he says speech is divided with regards to its potential of being truthful or not into two parts. Al-khabar, which means news, and insha, that which is established. So we are splitting speech now. So previously we split speech in terms of the word, the Arabic word, which is three types: noun, verb, or particle. Now we're splitting speech in terms of it being the possibility of it being truthful or not. So this is two: khabar and insha. Khabar and insha. In simple terms, I'll explain it now before we read. Khabar is something that you can say that you're truthful or you're wrong or you're lying. Okay, you're truthful or you're lying. Okay, insha is something that you can't say that to. So if I said, today we have a lesson, or today we had a lesson. So either we had a lesson or we didn't have a lesson. Either I'm telling the truth or I'm lying. Or and under lying, mistaken, all of that, can come depending on the person's intention. But generally, either it's truthful or it's not, or it's truth or it's false. But if I say to you, stand up. If I say to you, stand up, right, can you say I'm lying? Can you say I'm truthful? No. So that would be insha. That's what it is in simple terms. Let's read what the Sheikh says, inshallah. Al-khabar, that which can be described as truthful or untruthful in and of itself. What is excluded from our statement, that which can be described as truthful or untruthful, is al-insha. So basically the opposite, hence why it's two types. Because it isn't possible, its significance is not informed of until it can be said it is a truth or a lie. So basically what I just mentioned. And what is also excluded from our statement in and of itself is that which has no possibility of being truthful or is untruthful with regards to what it is being informed of. That is because the news with regards to what is being informed of is of three types. The Shaykh is saying in of itself. Why did the Shaykh say in of itself? He said because it can depend on, we say in of itself something of a truth or falsehood. But depending on external factors, it can narrow it down that this is all is truth, or this is all is falsehood, or this we don't know, and so on. So the Shaykh mentions three types of this. So he says, in terms of the person who is speaking, because depending on who is speaking, the station of that speech can differ, the ruling of that speech can differ. So he says, number one, what cannot be described as lying. So there are some things which are considered khabar, but you can never say that it's a lie. Such as the khabar, information from Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is established from them, meaning authentic hadith. So we can't say the Prophet ever lied. We can't say that. Okay, so that will always be something which is truthful. And number two, what cannot be described as honest, such as the news that is impossible in the legislation or intellect. The first example of which is the news of someone who claims messengership after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Shaykh says that which is impossible to be true, whether in the religion or just normally. In the religion, somebody claims to be a prophet, we say he's a liar. So we don't have to look into anything, he's a liar, because there's no way a prophet can come after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the second, the news of two opposing things coming together, such as movement and being still at the same time. There's two opposites. You can't be moving and still at the same time. So we say that this person is lying. And then the third, what can be described as truthful and untruthful, either equally or the preference to one of them, such as the news that a person absent is arriving and the like. Okay? So sometimes, depending on what is being said, one can have more likeliness to be true or more likeliness to be false, but the point being is that it could either be true or it could be false. And then insha, what has been established, what cannot be described as truthful or untruthful, from which are the commands and prohibitions, as in the saying of Allah Most High, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَاعْبُدُ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. وَاعْبُدُ اللَّهِ, worship Allah. Right. It's a command, you can't say, okay? Okay. I think with this, we'll stop here inshallah. Because the time's finished, we'll stop here inshallah. And from where we start tomorrow, that's when it gets a bit interesting inshallah, and more of Usool al-Fiqh will be. See, right now it's a bit of Arabic and some general points, general definitions. But from tomorrow inshallah, it's where it starts to get a bit more interesting. So we'll stop here inshallah. Subhanakallah wa hamdaka, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.